guys, so this is part 2 of my how to get an A in your English literature A-level coursework. That is a mouthful, let's be honest. So in this video I'm going to read through my A grade coursework, which is right here, and kind of talk you through it at the same time. It might be a long one, so I hope that it helps you. Yeah, if you haven't watched part 1 of this video, then I'll link it in the description box down below. That is my hints and tips on how to get an A in your coursework. So let's get on into the video. If you haven't watched my first video, I'm just gonna read out the title to start with, just so you know what my title for my coursework was. I was on AQA board and I chose this title. Compare and contrast the writer's use of presentational devices to present the naivety of women. Looking at alternative interpretations, how far do you agree that the naivety of women's approach to love only produces sympathy for their tragic ends? And then the 3 texts I did were The Woman Who Walks Into Doors by Roddy Doyle, which is a postmodern novel, Thomas Hardy, Tess of the D'Urbervilles, which is a Victorian novel, and then Othello, which is a play by Shakespeare. So for my introduction, I wrote all 3 texts, William Shakespeare's Othello, Thomas Hardy's Tess of the D'Urbervilles, and Roddy Doyle's The Woman Who Walks Into Doors, show aspects of women's naivety towards love. Othello sees Desdemona deceiving her father to marry a man who will ultimately lead to her end. Tess sees a young girl fall into circumstances that affect her whole future, and The Woman Who Walks Into Doors shows Paula fall completely in love with a man who emotionally and physically harms her. So that's kind of what I did with any introduction in English. So even in like exam, if I knew what the texts were about, or you could kind of see what texts were about, kind of introduce them a little bit like that. And then I went straight on to talk about the structure of like the form. Oh yeah, structure's another thing that I completely forgot to say, is how do they write it, how long are sentences, how much how much dialogue is there, what are the chapters like, things like that are really, really important to analyse and say why you think the writer chose to write it like that. So yeah, so the second paragraph I kind of wrote about form. So it goes, The Woman Who Walks Into Doors and Tess are both in the form of a novel, whereas Othello is a play. The reason for Doyle and Hardy's use of the novel is because it allows for far more detail of the story to be revealed, as, unlike a play, it is not limited to fit within a certain time. Another reason, for Hardy in particular, could have been due to his extremely descriptive style of writing. Such scenes could not have been created on stage, and so the form of a novel is far more fitting, as it allows Hardy to create extensive imagery in the reader's head and so has no limitations. So then I went on to talk about Othello. Othello was first performed in 1604 during the Renaissance period. When this play was first performed, it would have been male actors playing female roles. From a naivety point of view, it could be seen to be mocking a woman's naivety towards love. In a modern adaptation, the female roles would be played by female actresses. This would create a sincerer reaction to the characters' tragic outcomes. At the time of Shakespeare's writing, novels had not yet been introduced as a form of writing. The use of a play rather than a poem does not leave much room for reader interpretation, as actors are portraying a director's vision onto the audience. Therefore, dependent on director, Desdemona and Emilia could appear at different levels of naivety. Both Desdemona and Emilia have traits of naivety within their character. Emilia unknowingly helps Iago to achieve Othello and Desdemona's demise when she gives him Desdemona's handkerchief. What he will do with it, heaven knows, not I. I'm nothing but to please his fancy. She is clueless to what Iago has planned and thinks it trivial. She gives Iago what he wants, as she believes her only purpose is to serve him in his needs. She has led her husband to greater power, which leads to the corruption of Othello, and hence the death of Desdemona and herself. Her unawareness of her husband's intentions creates sympathy for her, as her own actions unwillingly result in her conclusion along with Othello and Desdemona. So that's another thing, is you want to focus on characters that aren't just the main characters, just to show that you've had an understanding of the theme throughout the whole novel, and you're not just going off the Wikipedia page that's saying Desdemona ends up dead because of Iago because he manipulated Othello. Because other characters do play a big part in it. Like Iago is, what's the word? Iago plays God in it, but other characters are deceived by him, and that is how the play ends up, how it ends. So obviously if you're not doing Othello, take what I just said in context of the text that you're doing yourself. On the other hand, Hardy's novel Tess shows how others' actions can lead characters to tragic ends. The novel is split into 7 sections. These 7 sections show different stages of life. For example, the first 2 are called The Maiden and Maiden No More. Hardy may do this to show how distinctly different Tess is between the sections. In the first section, Tess is not much older than a child. By the second section, she has been through hardship and has been raped. This changes both her outlook and demeanour. Hardy's novel is written in third person, allowing the reader to make up their own mind about Tess and her naivety without being given her thoughts and feelings to guide them. As the reader progresses through Hardy's novel, they can see Tess admitting to her previous naivety, showing that she learns with time. "I was a child when I left this house 4 months ago. Why didn't you warn me?" This quotation comes after she has been raped. She is angry at her mother for not telling her how men may behave. She believes she was kept in the dark about the actions men may take and claims that other girls have learned about these tricks through reading, which Tess had not had the opportunity to do. Hence the duty to teach her about men who behave in such ways fall onto her mother. Even if Tess had known of Alec's intentions, it is arguable whether the situation could have been changed, as she needed the job he gave her in order to provide for her family. Her naivety may have protected her in this situation, given she was not aware of what could happen until it did meaning. She did not have the constant worry of being assaulted in her mind. Hardy creates sympathy for Tess within this quote, as the reader will pity her for her lack of knowledge of men's desires and what that could lead to. Hardy never explicitly says that Tess has been raped, so the reader must decipher this for themselves. The reason for this is because when Hardy wrote Tess in the Victorian era, sex and rape were taboo subjects that would not be talked about. Modern readers are used to these things being discussed openly, and so they may find the lack of description takes away from the severity of Tess's rape. So then from that, my next paragraph goes into, it links from that context of the Victorian era into the context of modern day. 100 years on, when Roddy Doyle wrote The Woman Who Walked Into Doors in 1996, we can see that rape and sex are no longer taboo subjects, and it has become acceptable for even women to talk of such things, due to equality movements and feminism. This is shown when Doyle writes, "Hit me, thumped me, raped me." Yet Paula, much like Tess, is still the victim of a man's desires. The fact she is able to freely talk of such atrocities does not give her any more power over the man abusing her than Tess had over Alec. Doyle has used the form of a novel to convey his story. Unlike Hardy, Doyle uses the first person to capture his audience. This gives the reader a first-hand look at how Paula is affected by the actions of her husband, Charlo. The reader does not have to interpret what Paula's thoughts are, as we are given them. As Doyle is a male using a female voice to tell his story, it may reflect a man's views on the naivety of women, rather than a true look at women's naivety in situations like Paula's. Doyle uses the term brainwash to describe Paula's weakness to Charlo. We see aspects of this throughout the novel, such as when she states, "He was so kind, he lost his temper sometimes, he loved me, he bought me things." It seems unusual and wrong to describe a man who abused his wife as kind, yet the woman he directed his actions towards is the one who describes him as such. She seems in awe of Charlo despite what he has done to her. Her naivety comes from believing that every time he hits her, it will be the last. Doyle creates sympathy for Paula by the idea of Charlo having complete control over both her body and mind. When Paula is with Charlo, it is as if she cannot think for herself, and whatever he says or does is the right thing. And then I use that to link back onto Othello, so you need to make sure that all of your paragraphs are flowing, like there's a link between each paragraph, and it's not just here's a point, here's another point that's completely different, here's another one. Like, you have to make it link, and that's like how an essay will kind of flow, and it'll make it easy for the examiner to read if your essay has a logical outline. I'm really sorry that this video is going to be really long, but I hope that people who are watching to the end, this is actually really helping. Let me know if it does help. I'd like to know that it's helping. Much like Paula, Desdemona is unsure of what she has done wrong. Alas, what ignorant sin have I committed? Both women believe they have wronged their husbands in some way, despite this not being true. The main difference between the two women is that Desdemona's husband genuinely believes she has wronged him, whereas Charlo certainly cannot believe this of Paula. In 1904 AC, Bradley said that the deed he, Othello, is bound to do is not murder but a sacrifice. He is to save Desdemona from herself, not in hate but in honour, and also in love. This plays both on Desdemona's and Othello's naivety. Desdemona is naive of the lies that her husband has been fed, and Othello is naive to these lies. He believes the stories and evidence orchestrated by Iago. Perhaps it is Othello's naivety that leads to Desdemona's tragic outcome and not her own. It could be argued that Othello is naive in love, as he is willing to believe the apparent wrongdoings of his wife, and is led to thinking the only way to redeem his beloved wife is to murder her. Desdemona could be called naive for her willingness to marry a man whom she had fallen in love with for his heroic stories of war. Othello is acclimatized to the setting of war. This ingrained nature could be seen as part of the reason he was able to kill his wife. Othello is naive for thinking that you can kill someone out of love. If Desdemona had betrayed him, killing her would only be damning the both of them. This is perhaps the greatest tragedy. At the time the play was originally performed, the audience would have been highly religious, and as murder is a sin, Iago successfully ruins both Othello's mortal life and his afterlife, as he would be condemned to hell. Yet Desdemona never performs any wrong, meaning her innocence would still be intact and she would go to heaven. So the two lovers would not be together in the afterlife. An audience today may not be affected by the power of the religious context of the time Shakespeare wrote the play, as we live in a more secular society. However, they would most likely feel the same level of disgust and hatred towards Iago and his ability to taint the lives around him. So there you see that I used part of what a critic was saying, and then I also brought in religious context. Religious context is honestly so important in English literature back in, the previous times. Religion was a massive thing. So obviously it was a major theme in anything that you read from a while ago, and even some things today are still influenced by different religious things. For example, C.S. Lewis was inspired by the Bible. All of the Narnia stories have they're basically retellings of different stories in the Bible. So it's really, really, really important to keep religion as one of your main things that you're looking out for in texts. Innocence is not only shown through the actions of characters within these texts. At the beginning of Hardy's test, it states, "The banded ones were all dressed in white gowns." The description of the white gowns implies innocence and purity. It is debated widely whether or not Tess is innocent or whether she helped lead to her own end. The original text was titled Tess of the D'Urbervilles, a Pure Woman, showing that Hardy himself believed his heroine held a level of purity and innocence. James A.W. Heffernan states that violence and the threat of violence are the distinctive weapons of Tess. She shows this before she kills Alec, when she hits him with her glove and cuts his lip. It is disputable whether Tess can be classed as naive after her first encounter with Alec, as she appears to be enlightened to her influence on men. Someone who was truly naive would most likely not threaten violence. In this sense, Tess seems to be quite worldly and to know where she stands and how she wants to be treated. In the end, it is Tess's own actions that lead to her death. She did not need to kill Alec in order to return to Angel. After all, Angel is her legal husband, not Alec. Yet her temper overrules her and she performs an action which she cannot take back, and ultimately leads to her being parted from Angel once more. Tess could be said to want her tragic outcome. Angel, I am almost glad. Yes, glad. This happiness could not have lasted. It was too much. I have had enough. It is almost as if she knew where her actions would take her. It is difficult to call this naivety, as she is aware of what will happen to her. Another reading is that Tess thinks she is not deserving of happiness. She has only known sadness in her life and will not allow herself to have pleasure. She doesn't think that she can be worthy of Angel's love, so limits herself with the love he can give her. Hardy produces sympathy for Tess via this. It is the fact a young woman does not think herself worthy of happiness despite all she has been through that allows an audience to feel for her and her end. Despite this, we can refer to other areas of Hardy's novel and see that Tess truly is naive. Why didn't you tell me there was danger? Why didn't you warn me? Tess blames her mother for her rape. She believed that if her mother had told her of the atrocities that men are capable of, then she may not have been raped. Tess's mother also shows naivety, as not only does she fail to teach her daughter of danger, Joan encourages her towards her demise, as if it were not for her mother pushing her to form a relationship with Alec in the hope that it would lead some noble gentleman to marrying her, then perhaps Tess would have led a happy life instead of the troubled one she lives. Joan Durbeyfield is arguably the most naive of all the female characters within the novel. A modern reader would feel uncomfortable about the haphazard parenting techniques of the character. Joan is completely unaware of Alec's character and does not attempt to learn about him before sending her daughter away with him. Most people would question Alec's intentions, as he willingly offers Tess work and even collects her himself. This behaviour would be odd for a gentleman of the time. Workers would have had the duty of travelling to their workplace themselves and would not have intimate interactions with the man of the house. Similarly, Desdemona demonstrates a similar kind of ignorance when she asks Emilia that there be women do abuse their husbands in such gross kind. Desdemona clearly follows the expectations of a wife and cannot comprehend how anyone could do anything but. She appears shocked that some women cheat on their husbands. This is complete and utter naivety. She almost appears as if she is in her own world, where no wrong can be done. Her inability to comprehend such betrayal creates sympathy for her end, as this is the justification Othello has for killing her, despite there being a lack of truth behind it. In the essay The Destruction of Innocence in Shakespeare's Othello, it states that Desdemona's innocence also helps create the dramatic tension whereby the audience helplessly pities her inability to convince Othello of the truth of which they are aware. The structure of this is interesting as the audience knows far more than the characters themselves, implying a sense of dramatic irony. An audience would be willing Othello to discover the truth and to save Desdemona, but instead he only learns after he has killed her. Iago is the only character who interacts with the audience, and this creates a sense of responsibility within the audience for Desdemona's outcome. An audience cannot tell Desdemona of her fate, but they will be hopeful that she too will interact so they can save her. This again shows Desdemona's innocence towards love. Iago is the only character aware of the audience, and this echoes the fact that neither Othello, Emilia or Desdemona are aware of the full picture of the play. They do not know the goings and comings of the other characters or the content of hushed conversations. So that's another really important thing, is do think about how speech is directed at in plays. So obviously in some plays there won't be any audience interaction, but quite often, especially in Shakespeare, there is. One of the characters in particular normally does interact with the audience in some way, and it's interesting to see perhaps why they do that and what impact it has on how the audience are reacting to what's on the stage. We're nearing the end. There is a paragraph and the conclusion left. In contrast, in Roddy Doyle's novel, Paula does eventually have the bigger picture presented to her. Carmel saw what was happening and she made me see. Paula, as a modern woman, had the opportunity to be saved from the love that was ruining her. To a modern reader, it would be expected that as soon as someone realised the abuse a woman was receiving from her husband, that they would do something about it. As women are no longer viewed as the possession of men, it is no longer tolerated that men can hit their wives. Critics say that The Woman Who Walked Into Doors is a powerful feminist novel and an ode to the resilience of women, despite the fact Paula admits, "He demolished me, he destroyed me." She still continues on and lives her life despite the hardship and abuse she has faced. Paula seems naive to how horrific her situation is until she recognises that Charlo might start doing the same to her daughter. At this point, Paula appears enlightened and gains a sense of self-defence when she kicks Charlo out, as she knows the abuse cannot continue any longer and she cannot allow her daughter to experience the same thing. Doyle's use of the words demolished and destroyed shows just how abusive Charlo was. It not only enforces a sense of the physical abuse but also the emotional abuse. The difference between Paula, Desdemona and Tess is that Paula's end is not final. As a reader, we know that her life is most likely going to get better after the death of her husband, whereas both Desdemona and Tess's ends are death, and hence the audience and the reader is left feeling sympathy for the fact that the characters will never have a chance at a better life. Overall, there is a contrasting nature between the sympathy created for the women in the three texts. By the way, I've moved on to the conclusion. This is the conclusion now. For Doyle's novel, we have sympathy for the naivety of Paula during the course of her marriage, as she has been brainwashed to believe that the abuse she received is her own fault. "I provoked him. I always provoked him." The sympathy comes from the fact that her situation is so desperate. She is helplessly in love with a man who is only destroying every aspect of her. But a reader may also feel empowered by Paula because she does become less naive and wakes up to the reality of her situation. She changes the outcome of what is happening to her to better the lives of her children. Tess, on the other hand, has a case for both naivety and complete awareness. Hardy intentionally is clear in beginning his novel when Tess is still innocent and naive, and this aspect remains with the reader for the whole novel. However, at times her innocence can be questioned, and it may be hard for a reader to decide whether or not to feel sympathetic towards her. Tess is worldly, and this is shown throughout the novel. A key point is when she tells her younger brother that they live on a blighted star. She has no hope for happiness and joy, and maybe this is part of the reason she succumbs to Alec the second time and believes the only way out is to kill him despite Angel's return. Finally, Desdemona, whilst knowing Othello is angry at her for some reason, she is never certain of this reason and remains devout to him throughout. Of all the characters, the most sympathy is created for Desdemona. Perhaps this is partially due to Othello being a play, and this meaning there is little audience interpretation to be had compared to the two novels. Her character development and reader interpretation is far more rich. Desdemona is naive to betrayal and certainly does not expect it from her husband. She dies a completely innocent death, and hence an audience of any time period would feel sympathy for her tragic end. Really hope this video helped you. I'm really sorry if it was really long, but if you did stick around to the end, well done and good luck in your coursework. If you have any questions, please feel free to either ask them in the comments down below, or my Twitter and Instagram links are also in the description box down below. Please feel free to message me on either of those and I will do all I can to help you. If you have any tips on how to get an A in English coursework, if you've already done it, then please do leave them in the comments down below, because I would really like you all to help each other out with this, and I will see you in my next video.